Hello, Jim. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
Oranges and Sunshine is Jim's movie, your debut movie.
That's right.
But not your first time as director, of course, because you've done, I mean, pretty much every big TV, I don't want to say soap, but kind of ongoing saga. So whether it be The Bill or whether it be Waterloo Road, Footballers' Wives, you did some of that, didn't you?
I've had a dabble with a few of them.
What else did you do?
Footballers' Wives was a family favourite, obviously. My mum loved that.
Did you sit down with, obviously, son of Ken, right? So did you sit down and, because I'd love to know what your dad thought of Footballers' Wives.
He loved it.
Did he?
He loved it. He just, because it's stories, isn't it? Yeah. And, we watched it and he loved it. He thought it was hilarious.
So how many...
he was encouraging me. He was trying to make me take it further.
So for how many years were you a TV director?
That sounds like a reformed alcoholic, doesn't it? Hello, my name's... I was a TV director, but now...
about 7 or 8 years.
Okay, so the jump... Was this a jump that you always wanted to make?
Yeah, kind of. My heart was kind of always in cinema. My references were always cinema. But I kind of walked around it for quite a long time, and I had the script, for a very, very long time, and the idea, it just took a little while to kind of get it together.
And was part of that in your head the son of Ken bit, which I was talking about this with Mark earlier when we were talking about the show on Ellie's programme, is that this is the only movie for which we will need, which we can do that, because for your next movie it's all out there and you'll be Jim and we don't need to mention that.
Yeah, it was that. Some of it was that, absolutely. And, it just got to the point where I just thought, you know what, you just got to do it. Because otherwise you walk around it and you want it to be absolutely perfect, and you can go through draft after draft, and then at some point I thought, I'm just going to do it.
So were you waiting for the right script, or were you waiting for the right idea? What was it that...
well, it took quite a while to raise the finance, obviously, and it took a long time to do all the research and meet all the real people and get all of their stories. And then we'd went through many drafts of the script and tried lots of different things. So there was a big combination of things, but psychologically as well, I had to make a bit of a leap.
We should say, for those who don't know, just the bare outline of the story, which is shockingly a true story, which has been in the news quite a lot recently. There was an apology issued recently. Do you just want to tell people what the story's about?
Yeah, it's a story of a social worker from Nottingham. She uncovers a secret government programme to deport children in care from this country to Australia.
Which sounds like it must be a made-up science fiction film, right?
But it's
I think it's the use of the phrase secret government programme.
Yeah.
That's a science fiction term, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, I mean...
I think also the phrase deport children to Australia is pretty sinister.
Yeah, I mean, 130,000 children were involved, so it wasn't insignificant. And she went out and she tries to uncover the truth, and she takes on huge authorities and the government, obviously, puts herself in great danger, and then tries to reunite families that have been split up. And it's basically, the film is really her story.
So it starts in Nottingham in 1986, but the story that you are uncovering for the purposes of this film goes back how long? I mean, this secret government programme, presumably, so it's the British government or successive British governments and successive Australian governments goes over a period of how long?
Well, it went on for decades and decades, probably centuries, went right up until 1970, but it went on right the way through the 20th century, for sure.
We have a clip from early on in the film in which Emily Watson's character, who's the social worker you're talking about, stumbles upon this for the first time, and as I think most people, when they hear this story the first time, go, well, I'm sorry, that's just not possible. Here's a clip.
Well, what you're looking for isn't really what this group does. It's a local support group, really. I might be able to refer you to somebody who'd be able to offer you counselling.
What counselling? I want to find out who I am.
Well, this isn't really the way to...
I don't even know if my name and birth date are right. I remember leaving England. I was 4 years old. I was in a children's home because my parents were dead. Then they sent me in a boat to Australia. All I know for certain is I was born in Nottingham.
What do you mean they put you on a boat?
It was all in a boat for us. Hundreds of us.
What, your adoptive parents were emigrating?
No parents, no guardians, just a couple of hundred kids. They sent us away.
Well, that can't be right.
What do you mean?
Well, it's simply not legal. There's no way that a group of unaccompanied children would just be shipped off.
You're calling me a liar?
No, of course not.
That is the one thing I know. they know about who I am. Don't you tell me that's not true.
Now, this story was told in the book which Margaret Humphreys wrote called Empty Cradles. How long ago were you aware of that story?
About 2002. And then I went up to meet Margaret, and I sat opposite her, and she's got like a small office in Nottingham, and she just started to talk and tell me her story, and honestly I was completely blown away. And within the first few paragraphs of her talking to me, I absolutely knew it was a film I wanted to make. I found she was an incredibly inspirational woman.
Who were the children who were sent abroad?
Well, they were all in care of some kind, so they were all kind of in children's homes in this country, some run by the church, some run by local authority, and they were sent abroad for lots of different reasons, but, many of them sent to Australia.
But how were they picked?
They were, as far as we understand, they were that people sometimes, for example, from the church would go to see the children, and they would say, you can have a better life in Australia. There's a line in the film, in fact, where someone says that they were told that they would pick oranges off the trees for breakfast, the sun would shine every day, you'll have a better life there, you'll be looked after, crucially you'll be adopted into a family, not sent to a children's home. So in a lot of cases the children themselves were asked to make the decision, even though they were 5 or 6 or 7.
And one of the most alarming things about the story is that several of the people in the film say that as far as they believed, their parents were dead. I mean, this was totally untrue. They were led to believe that their parents had died when and this is factually correct. This is what happened.
Absolutely factually correct, yeah. I mean, both parties were lied to. The children were told, in most cases, their parents had died, and the parents were told that the children had gone to a better life, and they weren't to try and contact them in any way.
But not told they'd gone to a better life in Australia, but told they'd gone to a better life in that they had been adopted by families, rather than that they were still in homes, that they had found new families and therefore shouldn't be contacted because they now had new lives.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, everybody was lied to, and that we found that completely compelling, dramatically. The idea that, that all parties had been lied to, and then people trying to piece together their identity, discovering the lie, and then trying to work out who they are.
I think people will be shocked by the story, but also the fact that it finished in 1970. In other words, within the lifetime of most of the people that are listening to this, that this stuff was happening under their noses. Did you find out, because obviously it's not particularly within the scope of this story that you're telling, whose idea it was? So that's why I asked you about how long it had been going on for, because the film doesn't answer that, because it's not the story that you're telling. But who originally thought, I know, what would be a really good idea is that we should find the kids, often of single mothers who've been taken into care, and deport them and send them to children's homes or whatever in Australia. Yeah. Someone must have set this programme up.
Well, it was one of the challenges of the story, really, was that it happened for so many different reasons, which I think is what you're asking. For instance, Margaret herself came across a document that where someone had basically done the maths at the Home Office, and the maths were that it cost less to buy a ticket from Liverpool to Sydney than it cost to look after that child in care for a month. So one reason was economics. Also, Australia, of course, were trying to build their population. They had a whole White Australia programme. So they were
and you could go out there for a tenner, couldn't you?
The £10 POMs, absolutely. And there was another document they found that described that Australia needed good white stock, in inverted commas. So there were lots and lots of different reasons for it, and obviously the Catholic Church were involved, a big part of the story. So there were lots of different reasons for why it happened.
And the story that you decide to tell, clearly there are thousands of people that you could have picked on. Just tell us one of the stories and why you picked on this particular guy, and then we'll do some more after the news.
There was just one particular guy that we met in Perth, who Rona Munro, who wrote the script, had an amazing relationship with, and we found him absolutely compelling because he was like the opposite of what we expected to find. If you offered this guy sympathy, he'd literally run out the door. He was always messing around. He had this incredible sense of humour and huge strength as well. And he was like just the opposite of a victim. So we found him an incredibly compelling person, and he started to become the inspiration for a character played by David Wenham called Len.
Jim Loach is here. His film is Oranges and Sunshine, and it's obviously a deliberately misleading title because you've already explained, that the oranges and the sunshine were the promise that was offered to the kids, but there's not a lot of oranges and sunshine in the movie, is it? It's not. I mean, I think it's an uplifting film. It's a grim subject, but there are enough uplifting people in your film for it. It's not a feel-good film either, but you're not going to emerge feeling depressed. I think you're going to emerge thinking, what an extraordinary woman Margaret Humphreys was, and her very supportive husband, apart from anything else.
Yeah, that's good if you do. I mean, the audiences that have seen it so far, that's what they take from it. So far, they've really incredibly responded to those elements of the story and found it incredibly inspirational. And I'm really pleased if that's the case, because that was the film we wanted to make.
What about the locations? Because there's a key scene in which they go to Bindoon, which is the scene of several terrible events. And
this is a children's home.
There's a children's home, Bindoon, which is, where exactly is it?
It's about 100 miles north of Perth in Western Australia.
Okay, and what happens in the movie, which seems profoundly cinematic, is that our heroine is taken out on a trip to Bindoon. She says she doesn't want to go there because it's not her past, and she has this terrible sense of trepidation. And she's taken off by the character you were speaking about earlier, and they drive for an awfully long time through the middle of nowhere, and they finally get to a point when he stops the car and he says, right, get out. This is where you first see Bindoon, and there is a shot which reveals what looks for all the world like the castle of Otranto or some building which you think that must be a CG. So what is that? That's a genuine structure? What are we seeing there?
It unfortunately, you're not seeing the actual place, Bindoon.
Because it's not in Transylvania, the actual place.
the actual place, Bindoon, is very similar in spirit. Absolutely, right. I promise you. We would have liked to have filmed at the real place because it's incredible, and Rona Munro and I went up there, and we were taken by two people that were housed there as children. It was one of the most memorable days of my life. And we would have liked to have filmed at the real Bindoon, but they gave us a load of excuses and they prevaricated. At one stage, they said that we might have to go for a meeting at the Vatican, which I was well up for, but. Unfortunately, it didn't come to that, and they said no in the end. But
unsurprisingly, because obviously it's seen as a scene of terrible things. It's not something we say, yes, come and make that film. I mean, are they reconciled with the story that you're telling
at Bindoon?
Yes.
No, not at all. They're still hugely in denial about it. Is our experience. For instance, when we asked to film, they said, there's no point in raking over old coals. There's no point digging up the past, and this is a really important part of the history of that place, and we should have filmed there, and we could have filmed there, and it would have been a huge acknowledgement of what had happened for the people that were housed there as children.
The other thing that's remarkable is that the official apologies by both the British and the Australian government they're like in the last 2 years, on the 2009.
Gordon Brown and Kevin Rudd, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it's very recent.
So you said you first became involved in this story in 2002. So for 7 years of your involvement in it, it hadn't been officially accepted. It hadn't. So you were involved in it during the official acceptance that this really had happened.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, the apologies happened about 2 days before we started shooting, so it all happened at the same time. It was an incredibly heightened time, and feelings were running really high.
And did they want an apology? The people who you spoke to, has that made anything?
Yeah, it was
better?
Huge for them, absolutely huge, because and it was the Brits, it was the British. They wanted to apologise because what they wanted was an acknowledgement from their own government, because they were British children. They wanted an acknowledgement from their own government that they were sent and it was wrong and they were lied to. They wanted a full acknowledgement of what had happened, and it was huge for them, absolutely huge.
Do you know who stopped it? I mean, that's why I asked again about how it started, that it clearly didn't happen beyond 1970. So somebody, maybe in the Wilson government or the Ted Heath government, said the child migrants programme, that should stop.
We never really got to the bottom of that. No, so I can't answer that. I don't, because no one really knows why.
Because presumably someone must have said, you know what, if this gets out, we're in trouble. Or this has got to stop, it's morally wrong, one of the two.
Yeah, but it petered out by 1970, but no one knows exactly why.